One of the first trips I ever did, kind of the main first trip I ever did, was I went the entire Route 66 from Chicago all the way out to California. And I passed through the short 11 miles that goes through Kansas. A lot of people don't even realize that Route 66 goes through Kansas. And the video I made for that was literally a couple minutes long because it was such a short trip. And so I've always wanted to come back and revisit it and take a deeper dive. So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna go on the old section of Route 66, and then we're maybe gonna go to some places that other people usually don't go in the Route 66 Kansas area, some areas around Route 66. So let's get going now. We're starting here on the state line, and this is the state line kind of saloon there, and the obviously yellow brick road for Kansas as we're heading from Missouri into Kansas. And there's only a couple miles until you get to the first town, but there's a couple things to see before you get there. This is an interesting little kind of collection of railroad trains and parts, and almost kind of like a railroad graveyard. And there's actually more than what I'm showing you here, so kind of an interesting little stop. I haven't seen it really documented very much. There's your first nod to the movie Cars right there. And now just a little bit past that, we go over this nice bridge, and then there's a kind of pull-off / rest area here on the side, and it tells you all the different distances to different Route 66 landmarks and iconic places. There was a homemade muffler man. The muffler man is something that's on Route 66 quite a bit. There was one here the last time I was here, and now it's gone, unfortunately. Here's some nods to Route 66, the Burma Shave signs. If you've been on Route 66, you've seen those. And this is kind of the rest area. And, you know, I've been here a few times. I've really never seen anybody here, but there's places to take pictures. I'm assuming at one point this was more of a stop along the way. But it's nice. They talk about, or they show things about different parts of the road. The Cars movie is a big thing for Route 66. And so just a nice place to stop, and it's very artsy, some homemade art and crafts here. And then there's a picture of Galena. That'll be the first town that we're heading towards. And then, yeah, who's that guy? So there's one of the famous cars from the movie, and the voice of the sheriff actually signed the car right there. We are pulling into our first town on the route here in Kansas. This is Galena. Our first stop is the famous Cars on Route 66, on the Route 66. And this is where the inspiration for the character in the movie Mater came from. And apparently the makers of that movie were driving through and they saw this old tow truck, and that's where they got the inspiration for the movie. So pretty cool little stop. So Galena was started around 1871. That's at least when the railroad came through, as we're going to look at a bunch of cool old buildings as I tell you about it here. But the town didn't really spring up until 1877, and that's when lead was discovered there. It was called Galena, the lead ore. And it's had a bunch of different names. It was going to be known as Cornwall. It was actually known as Short Creek originally because it was by a nearby creek. It was also known as Bonanza briefly before being called Galena finally in 1877. There were over 30,000 people in this area. This was a big mining area in southeast Kansas and then northeast Oklahoma. And eventually some of those mining practices yielded some toxic metals, and so a lot of these areas were part of Superfund sites that had to be cleaned up, and Galena was near some of that. Pitcher, Oklahoma is kind of the more famous one that was totally abandoned because it had been very hazardous. The population grew to over 10,000 people around 1900, and that's when the mining was really going, and then it slowly decreased, and in the census has gone down to 2,761. So in the past 100 years, it's lost about 40% of its population, but lost over 70% from its peak. But there are still a lot of really cool old buildings, lots of Route 66 stuff, as you can see in the video here. So it's a pretty cool place to check out and to get our day started. Just west of Galena, there's this old cemetery, Stevenson Cemetery, started in 1870. Just lots of old headstones to check out here. I haven't seen this documented on YouTube previously, though, so I thought I'd stop and show it to you. But yeah, just a cool little cemetery right west of Galena. Next stop is going to be in the unincorporated community of Riverton. Obviously got its name from the nearby river. And this is the general store here in Riverton. It's one of the main places if you want to see some Route 66 things. Lots of t-shirts and memorabilia and all that kind of stuff, and they're always playing the movie with when you visit. So you can get you a sandwich, get you some refreshments, and definitely an old store that has a lot of interesting old things to check out. The old Riverton store. Riverton probably has the least amount of Route 66 things compared to the other two communities. There's three communities along Route 66 here in Kansas, and it's the one unincorporated community of the three. So, but definitely worth checking out. It's right on the river there. You can see, very beautiful, and probably passed by most people who are looking for all the kind of touristy Route 66 stuff. But definitely a few things here to stop and see in Riverton. Just to the west of Riverton, as we go around the roundabout, they have a pull-off where you can check out some interesting things. There's a lot of information about Route 66 in Kansas and the history of the byway, and the different towns, how they were boom towns here in this area. And then they have one of the old Route 66 signs there. It's a very really good place to take a picture. About 2 miles west of Riverton is the famous Rainbow Bridge. And this is a single-span concrete marsh arch bridge, and is the single surviving bridge of this type on the entire Route 66. And it was built in 1923 and placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1983. Just down the road from the Rainbow Bridge is the Field of Dreams. Don Carnes, who's a local baseball coach there at Baxter Springs, the next town over, had a dream to build a complex for the community, He had been the baseball coach for a couple of decades, and then him and his wife decided to build this. This is a baseball field, and there's actually a softball field on this complex as well. Now we're going to head east to Lowell. It's not on Route 66, but I've not seen anybody do a video about Lowell before, and it's right around all these other Route 66 towns. And when you get there, you drive through, it's mostly just a community, but what I found out is it's the oldest community in the county, which includes these other towns that we're going through today. There's not much left today in terms of old historic buildings. There's an old church there, but like I said, as you drive through, it's mostly just houses. There's a few things over on the water, like this older building, and then I did find an interesting bridge right next to the road. Now we roll into our final town here, Baxter Springs. And this is the largest town on the Route 66 Kansas section, and population of almost 4,000. It's had a really interesting history, and there are lots of great old buildings in the downtown area to check out. It was settled in the 1850s, and then had a significant time there during the Civil War, where there were several different forts and camps built to protect against the Confederates from the eastern side here, being so close to Missouri. And then after the war, the town really grew as a cow town, and it's said to be the first cow town in Kansas. And they would bring cattle through this area from Texas, and in the 1870s, the population was estimated to be almost 5,000 people. Then it also had a little history as a resort town because of the local springs, and people would come up here and try to visit the springs for the medicinal reputation. And then the next history it had was as a mining center, like I had mentioned previously with Galena. And so the final thing was Route 66 came through here in the 1920s, and that helped keep the population sustained for quite a while. And the population now is under 4,000 people, and that's the first time it's been that low since the 1920s. But generally, the population has been between 4,000 and 5,000 people for the last 100 years. And at that Oklahoma sign, that brings an end to our Route 66 Kansas trip today. There is a lot in these, few towns. Most people, when they think of Route 66, they don't think of Kansas because it's literally, around a dozen miles. And so it's I think interesting that they seem to have embraced the Route 66 stuff as much as anywhere. There's certainly places that are more significant in historical context of Route 66, but Kansas has done a great job. And any of these towns you go through, you're going to be able to see some Route 66 connection, and it's definitely worth your while to check it out. If you like this video, there are several ways to support this channel. You can donate by hitting the thanks button under the video or purchase Travel with a Wiseguy merchandise. In the description of this video is a link to my website where you can learn more about the channel and sign up for my newsletter. And if you aren't interested in any of that, I'm just happy that you took a few minutes out of your day to watch this video and learn about these small towns along Kansas Route 66. Thank you very much, and now on to the outtakes. Here we go. Let's see the spin rate here. Excellent.